Hello everyone and welcome to Overtime, and I do believe that video auto-played, so let's put the kibosh on that one. Let's see, and it's still playing, of course, so let's give me 1 minute here, and there we are. So, welcome to Overtime. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. This week in the news, when Biden first took office, he set a goal of 100 million COVID-19 vaccines administered within the first 100 days of his administration. Today, he announced that tomorrow he would reach that goal 42 days early. Quote, "This is a time for optimism, but not a time for relaxation," Biden said. And he asked that everyone maintain social distancing and other precautions as COVID there's a minor echo, and I suspect I know why. That should deal with it. As COVID cases are rising by more than 10% in 14 states. Indeed, we have learned that the White House is preparing for what they believe is going to be a fourth coronavirus surge, as new variants to which we have limited immunity, and the vaccinations have a limited ability to protect us against, start to get a foothold in the United States. Once again, Senator Ron Paul grilled Dr. Fauci on the need for masks and for such extensive COVID-19 precautions. This is that video and his response. And let's wind this back, make sure the audio is in. If you have any difficulties with the audio, please don't hesitate to let me know. I'm sure you'll let me know, and no, and no, and no. But at any rate, here is that exchange.
What study shows significant reinfection, hospitalization, and death after either natural infection or the vaccine? It doesn't exist. There is no evidence that there are significant reinfections after vaccine. In fact, I don't think we have a hospitalization in the United States after the 2-week period after the second vaccination. We don't have a death in the United States.
You're not hearing what I'm saying about variants. We're talking about wild type versus variants.
And what proof is there that there are significant reinfections with hospitalizations and death from the variants? None in our country. Zero.
Well, because we don't have a prevalent of a variant yet. We're having one. Can I finish? We're having 117 that's becoming more dominant.
Your policy based on conjecture.
No, it isn't based on conjecture.
Variants, so you want people to wear a mask for another couple years.
No.
You've been vaccinated and you parade around in 2 masks for show.
No.
You can't get it again. There's virtually 0% chance you're going to get it, and yet you're telling people that have had the vaccine, who have immunity. You're defying everything we know about immunity by telling people to wear a mask who've been vaccinated.
No.
Instead, you should be saying there is no science to say we're going to have a problem from the large number of people being vaccinated. You want to get rid of vaccine hesitancy? Tell them they can quit wearing their mask after they get the vaccine. Okay. You want people to get the vaccine? Give them a reward instead of telling them that the nanny state's going to be there for 3 more years and you got to wear a mask forever. People don't want to hear it. There's no science behind it.
Well, let me just state for the record that masks are not theater. Masks are protective. And we
have immunity there, theater. If you already have immunity, you're wearing a mask to give comfort to others. You're not wearing a mask because of any science.
I totally disagree with you.
Dr. Fauci, if you could respond so that we could understand the difference between the virus itself and the variants and the reason for a mask.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't hear.
If you could respond to the question so that we could all understand the difference between the vaccine in controlling the wild type versus the variants that are out there and the reason for wearing a mask, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, yes. First of all, when you have a variant, you have an immunity that you get what's convalescent sera, and the same sort of thing. If I vaccinate you or me against the wild type, you get a certain level of antibody that's specific for a particular viral strain. If there's a circulating variant, you don't necessarily have it. You have some spillover immunity to be sure, but you diminish by anywhere from 2 to 8-fold the protection. So the point I'm saying is that there are variants in now circulating. The point that Senator Paul was making was that if you look at wild type only, there is some clear-cut credence to what he's saying. But we are living right now in a situation where we're having a dominance of 117, which was the original UK. We have a very troublesome variant in New York City, a 526. We've got two variants in California, a 427, 429, and we have a number of others. So we're not dealing with a static situation of the same virus. That was the only point I'm making.
As of this moment, 12% of Americans are considered fully vaccinated against the original wild type of COVID-19. Again, far ahead of schedule. However, this argument that Mr. Paul was making was essentially, and in my view, is actually one of the arguments that's often used against gun control. Well, gee, who cares whether it worked or not in other countries? I'm talking about the United States, as if we're not the same species, or there's a huge difference between us and other Western countries. There isn't. And in this particular case, the variants that are out there, there are 4 reasonably serious ones that have been identified. There's a number more than 4, but 4 that are concerning. At least 2 of them are significantly more infectious, but appear to be no more deadly. They may rack up higher numbers in the end because they spread faster, but they aren't actually, your chances of dying from it once you have it are no more or less than the wild type COVID. However, having said that, there's at least one variant which is considered at least somewhat more deadly than the original COVID. And if it's at least as transmissible, it will eventually, given enough time, be more serious than the current COVID. We know that it's more deadly because it's been killing people in other countries. And the argument that, well, gee, it hasn't killed anyone in the US, therefore we're okay, is unhinged. We have worked very hard to try to keep it out of this country. Trump, in his last days, seems to have attempted to actually bring it in by removing restrictions on countries where it is prevalent. Including it was I think it was Brazil and Africa. The fact is, because it's not here, is the reason it's not killing Americans, not because we are some different species of mammal that is somehow immune to it. Dr. Fauci is not speculating. He knows because A, this is how viruses work, and during the what I'm still unfortunately going to refer to as the Spanish flu over a century ago. Since then, we knew how these things work. It hasn't changed. That's why they call it science. And what he's saying is completely unhinged and appears to be much more driven towards getting people to are trying to placate his constituents who will die if they follow his advice. Certainly not all of them, certainly not the majority of them, but more than otherwise could. He is considering his political career, not his constituents, and certainly not this Constitution or this country which he vowed to defend. This is one of the most shocking exchanges I've seen in quite some time, and I do a news program. Having said all that, Democrats have been considering removing the filibuster and or at least making it, quote, more painful to use. Now, the original filibuster, the way it worked, and we've all heard of it and seen essentially how it's supposed to work, you didn't sit there and say, I call filibuster on you. What you would do is you'd say, I'd like to speak, and when your turn came up, you'd start talking, but you would not yield. You would just keep talking. Now, so long as you keep talking and don't stop for more than 2-3 seconds, really more than is needed to take a breath, no one can take the floor from you. So unless you yield or stop, you have the floor, and so you keep talking and talking and talking and talking. No bathroom breaks, no breaks of any kind. You don't stop, you keep talking. That was called a filibuster, and the idea was to stop legislation from going through. And filibusters, I forget what the longest was in recorded history. I want to say it was somewhere around 32 hours. It's very difficult for someone who's the average age of most of these senators to keep going, I think, far much past 12 hours. A filibuster is a staggering thing and very difficult to do, at least in the old days. Now, somebody pointed out that they're all basically sitting there, and all business in Congress of all kinds basically comes to a grinding halt while someone is sitting there, and they can talk about anything they want to. There's no rule that says they have to talk about the bill. So they can read Shakespeare, they can read Dr. Seuss, they can talk about their favorite movie. They can do whatever they want to do as long as they don't stop talking. Seems like a job I'd have been ideal for. Nonetheless, it was decided that because this was inconvenient for everybody else who had to sit through it, that if you decided to filibuster, all you had to do was say, I'm doing a filibuster, and that would count. Now, the only other way to get past a filibuster, other than if they stopped talking or if they yield, was for a 2/3 vote to close the subject, despite the fact somebody still had something to say. This would raise the bar for any bill which required a 50-50 vote, or just a simple majority to win, which would be actually 50-50 with the vice president, or just a 51-49, raise the bar to a 2/3 vote as soon as a filibuster was done, because you'd actually have to stop the filibuster before you could vote on the bill. Now, because this was so draining, they just said, from now on, if you want to filibuster, we're not going to make you just do the whole stand-up thing because it's a waste of everybody's time. Just say you're filibustering. Let's leave it at that. And that is now how filibusters are done. The problem is that has made it so easy to filibuster that now any bill to which there is any contention whatsoever, somebody could just say, I call filibuster. I call filibuster on you. And all of a sudden, the requirement to pass the bill goes from 51 votes to the from a regular majority to a 2/3 majority. This is obviously very good for the party that's the minority party, because now they don't really have to scrape together votes or maintain their coalition, and even with only 1/3 in the Senate, they can effectively stop anything they really don't like. But this made all bills, essentially, which were supposed to be, for the vast majority of them, a simple majority pass, now require 2/3. So there's been a lot of talk in recent years of either eliminating the filibuster, which I think is pointless and should be eliminated, or at least somehow finding a way to make it painful to do again. The fact that you actually had to stand up there certainly deterred people from doing it needlessly. The Democrats have been talking about what they can do to either remove or reduce the frequency and ease of use of the filibuster. Now, this has been always talked about by one party or another, and is often opposed by the minority party for obvious reasons. At this point, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said that if the Democrats try to bypass the filibuster in any way, in order to pass a voting rights legislation, which is intended to block states from limiting the vote, states like Georgia, in which their governor said that it was not just that too many people were voting, but it was the quality of voters that he didn't like. Not that there was any fraud, just didn't like the quality. Which, to be fair, in many cases, I don't like either, but I don't sit there and say there should be an IQ test or education test or anything like that for you to vote. Nonetheless, McConnell said that if the Democrats try to pass or to bypass the filibuster in order to pass the voting rights legislation, he would begin a, quote, scorched earth policy in the Senate moving forward, saying that no Senate Democrat or Republican had ever seen the trouble that he would cause for Democrats if they attempted to bypass the filibuster. In response to the threat of scorched earth, Majority Whip Dick Durbin told reporters, quote, he has already done that. Meanwhile, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson has said that at no time did he feel threatened by the rioters, protesters, whatever you wish to call them, at Capitol Hill, but added that he might have had they been Black Lives Matter protesters. Quote, I know that these people, the protesters on the 6th, love their country and truly respect law enforcement and would never do anything to break the law, so I wasn't concerned. This statement is of breathtaking ignorance, since even breaking into the Capitol Hill building is breaking reasonably significant laws, and multiple ones, I might add. Trashing Nancy Pelosi's office, stealing her top secret code word clearance government fucking computer is breaking the law. Erecting a gallows to hang the Vice President of the United States is, last I checked, not legal. And these protesters were responsible ultimately for 5 deaths, including 2 police officers, as well as the arrest of 40, quote, protesters who have been charged with assaulting law enforcement officers, which resulted in more than 100 officers injured that day. These are the ones he feels safe with, not the Black Lives Matter protests. And indeed, while the Black Lives Matter protests did break into government buildings and trash a number of them, I will point out that A, to the best of my knowledge, this was all done after hours and when the buildings were closed. B, they never threatened to murder anyone, and they certainly never took hostages. C, to the best of my knowledge, also, they did not injure anyone, although actually they may have in a couple of engagements with police officers. I should probably double check before I go out saying that. To the best of my knowledge, there weren't any, and they certainly never intended to, unlike these people. We now know that a number of these protesters who love this country and who would never do anything to break the law and were respectful of the law intended to murder, to execute a number of state officials, including Nancy Pelosi and the Vice President of the United States, and that these officials had to either flee the building or hide in fear of their lives. The fact that more people weren't killed was the result of not good intentions on behalf of these government-loving seditionists, but rather the quick thinking on a number of police officers, quick thinking on the behalf of a number of Secret Servicemen, and the use of secret rooms hidden in the Capitol building for just such a purpose. And if our senators and congressmen had not been hiding in those rooms, we don't know what would have happened, but we know for a fact what the intention was of a number of those people, not all of them. But then again, I could say the same thing about the Black Lives Matter protesters. The vast majority had no intention of causing any violence. So why one is violent and terrifying and you have to be afraid of them, and the others are all white, I don't know. Moving forward. Texas State Representative Brian Slayton has introduced a bill, HB 3326, to abolish abortion in Texas. This bill, among other things, proposes that getting an abortion is punishable by death. Put in a language that Mr. Slayton, I think, would understand, if a 35-year-old woman gets an abortion in Texas, this bill would propose aborting her in the 140th trimester. Now, in the same way that Texas is trying to make it illegal to insult a police officer, make it a crime to insult a police officer or to obstruct a, and it's already a crime, but make it move it from it was a Class A misdemeanor to a Class C felony. The British Parliament is now proposing a bill which would, among other things, make, and I want you to brace yourself for this. This is. We do on occasion, especially we have live shows, as people know, and we've covered riots live. And when we do, things happen. We have had actually people killed on our air. It's not pleasant, but it is the reality, and we do try to cover that as best we can. So I'm going to use some difficult language, and if you have a problem with difficult language, best to probably mute for a few seconds. But what they have made doing illegal to police officers is seriously annoying or inconveniencing. Yes, okay, the British Parliament is making, quote, seriously annoying or inconveniencing or threatening to seriously annoy or inconvenience a person tantamount to causing serious harm, and explicitly prescribes a fine or imprisonment for up to 10 years upon conviction of threatening to seriously annoy. Actually, I think it's all people. I was presented as a police officer, but my read on the bill is it's everybody. I'm glad we don't have Sharia law. And I'm sorry to use language like threaten to seriously annoy, but it's an adult show, so we have to see these things unvarnished. I apologize to anyone I've offended. Robert Aaron Long, a 21-year-old man living with his family in Atlanta, Georgia, purportedly obsessed with pornography, exotic massage, and happy endings. I will assume you know what that means. Was kicked out of his home by his parents on Monday for his excessive downloading of pornography and obsession with sex. The next day, according to police, he purchased a handgun and said he was going to kill Asians. He traveled to 3 different spas, including an aromatherapy spa, and shot 9 people, killing 8 of them. 7 of those were women, and 6 of them were of Asian descent. He was arrested on his way to Florida, where purportedly he was attempting to continue his massacre. Upon his arrest, he told police that, quote, their very existence was a temptation for him, and that he needed to eliminate that temptation. The next day, the Violence Against Women's Act was reauthorized, despite the objections of 172 Republican representatives. Myanmar, also known as Burma, is a country in Southeast Asia bordering on Thailand. Borders Thailand, Laos, Bangladesh, China, and India. It has a population of roughly 54 million, which is about 20% the size of the U.S. and double the population of the state of California. Myanmar is also known as Burma, and it gained independence from the British Empire in 1948. A military coup organized by the same military structure that's in place today, actually, took over in 1962 and changed the name. Now, the official language of Myanmar is Burmese. They changed the name from Myanmar to Burma. However, because this was done, and actually this was done in 1986, because this was done in 1986 by a ruling military junta, many countries have refused to acknowledge the name change. But ironically, in their language, Burma and Myanmar mean the same thing. Burma is just a more formal way of saying it. The name of their country has been formalized, but actually technically it's the same word. Nonetheless, many countries do not like to use that word when referring to the country and still recognize it as Myanmar. In 2011, a civilian government was able to take hold, and the de facto leader of that government is Miss Suu Kyi, said that actually both names were in fact valid, and she herself did not care which one the country was referred to. In their most recent election, the military backed Kyi's opposition, who nonetheless had his ass handed to him in that election. On February 1st, and something that we covered reasonably extensively, and you can see in our archives if you'd like to learn more about how and why it happened. But nonetheless, on February 1st, the Burmese military staged a coup d'état and took control of Myanmar, citing widespread voter fraud in the general election, which Kyi did in fact win by a landslide. The military took complete control of the country and declared a 1-year state of emergency. Ms. Kyi was detained, as well as many members of her party. The other members of her party all fled and are now in hiding. Kyi is currently, her status is unknown, her location is unknown. Purportedly she was under house arrest, but as of this moment, nobody knows where she is. She's presumed alive and healthy, but nobody knows. She's been charged with possession of illegal communications devices, violating COVID-19 restrictions during the campaign, and publishing information which, quote, could cause fear or alarm. This has inspired a large number of protests. People have been taking their cars, just turning them off in the middle of the streets, blocking up the streets, stopping the military from being able to move easily, at least throughout the country. These protests have been repelled by tear gas, rubber bullets, and live ammunition. As of this moment, scores of people have been killed, and we don't have a we don't know where this is going to end. The leader is of the military is General Halang, and he has said that he is doing this for the people, and that he is doing this to defend, quote, true and disciplined democracy. It was his predecessors in the same spot, people that he actually worked under, who ran the last military junta that controlled this country. Myanmar's election commission, as well as multiple countries across the globe, have said that they could find no evidence of election tampering, let alone evidence of any tampering sufficient enough to have actually changed the outcome. And certainly the victory seems to reflect the national popular opinion today. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that this coup has been, quote, a serious blow to democratic reforms, and the US and UK have responded by sanctions against the top military, including General Halang, and who today still remains the sole seat of power in Myanmar. And that is the news for the week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try. I kept sort of looking at the live chat, and every now and then I get paranoid that all of a sudden I'm going to see a yellow bar, and I think I see one, and oh, someone's trying to get my attention, and no. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly check the live chat, see if there's anything anybody wants to briefly talk about. And other than that, I think we may be good for the day. I'm obviously what Ron Paul did was immensely troubling. Just genuinely troubling. And but Biden's success with vaccinating 12% of the U.S. population is first piece of real good news I've heard in a while. That, and Japan did. It's actually what the court has said isn't binding, but the Japanese court has said that it's unconstitutional to block gay marriage, and hopefully that will keep it from happening in Japan. So we will see. I'm sure that the military finds that mildly annoying. Yeah, let me see if I can. Let's see. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, well, nowadays, if the military finds it. And I'm also very troubled by the UK bill, which hasn't passed, but the idea that that is you're looking at a Sharia caliphate right there. I mean, you're not allowed to threaten to annoy a police officer. By the way, that really, the way that's worded strikes me as meaning that if the police officer finds it annoying, that's it. Doesn't matter if the rest of us would find it annoying. What really matters is, does the police officer find it annoying? So if you annoy a police officer, if a police officer hates the sound of nails on a chalkboard, and you happen to accidentally replicate that sound by accident, you've just annoyed that police officer. That's a problem. That's insane that anyone could propose that, and it is, I think, following in the footsteps of where the U.S. really has been on a lot of this stuff. The abortion. My opinion on abortion has changed somewhat over the years. I studied philosophy under a man named Patrick Durr, who was a medical ethicist and philosopher in Massachusetts, and head of the philosophy department at Clark University. And I really liked the guy a lot. He was the only one who ever really got me to seriously consider my views on abortion. But I've had one view that I've always had, which is that there is no black and white answer that anyone can point to and prove deductively is correct, which means A, we're going to have to keep discussing it, and B, there's very few opinions that are genuinely invalid and very few people that shouldn't be allowed to speak. That means that just because a man is never going to have an abortion and doesn't have to suffer the consequences as a woman of having a child, doesn't mean he doesn't have a right to speak on the issue, any more than the North, which didn't hold slaves, didn't have a right to speak about slavery in the South. If you truly believe something's immoral, you have an obligation to stand up against it, whether it affects you or not. That's a really stupid argument that men can't opine just because they're never going to have kids. Having said that, the idea that they have the same skin in the game is ludicrous. So I think there has to be more tolerance of a wider range of views. The idea that abortion is murder is not a new one, but I will point out that arguably abortion is in the Bible, and Jesus never said anything against it. And Jesus, by the way, lived in a time when everybody knew what abortion was. He spoke out against a lot of things, never mentioned it. So I have to believe that either he didn't care about it or his views weren't that it was wrong. At any rate, I don't object to people who think it's murder. I don't necessarily agree with them, but I don't object to that belief. But sitting there and suggesting that until we really have this resolved, and certainly in light of or against where the U.S. Supreme Court has been to date on the issue, you cannot suggest imprisoning someone for any length of time. 30 days is excessive for getting one, based on where our courts stand today. You want to change that in our court system, you go ahead and do that, and you'll be opposed, and you may win, you may lose, I don't know. But I know where things stand now. This is insane. Suggesting that we're going to murder people. This is the exact kind of politics that Republicans accuse Democrats of all the time. And to the best of my recollection, I don't really remember Democrats doing this kind of shit. This is a political tool. It is as cynical as what Ryan was doing, and this notion of scorched earth by a man who's been doing nothing but scorched earth during all of Obama's administration. Enough of the. I think when Obama won, one of the reasons we got Trump was because I think liberals were a little too snarky about the victory. I think they were too self-assured and cocky about the victory, and about ushering in a new wave of change and progressivism, which not only didn't really happen, but there's a population that remembers a simpler time when boys didn't kiss. When, it's not even about sexism or racism or homophobia. In many cases it is, don't get me wrong. But it's about change. It's about the fact that some of these people can't fix the clock on their Betamax VHS recorder that they can't even get tapes for anymore. And it keeps blinking noon. And they don't understand the world. I get that, and I get being afraid of the change, I get being confused, and I get asking it to stop. It ain't going to stop. The world's going to change, and in general, it seems to me that there's a slow arc towards progress, so that's where it's going to go. But that also doesn't mean that we throw out the people who weren't expecting it. So when Obama came in and everything was going to be this progressive dream, what'd they do? They hit us back with Trump. Trump had one qualification, one, for president. He pissed off the liberals. That was his only qualification. It's not a qualification for president, but it is if you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, and you've had your ass handed to you for 8 years. They know he's not a man of the people. He shits on a golden toilet, for fuck's sake. You think they're that stupid that they didn't know? They like saying that they didn't know because they like us thinking that they're that stupid. They know. And they know he's incompetent, most of them. Except for the one job requirement he had. He pissed off the liberals. Now we've got Biden in, and we've got some of the same attitude. They're going to push back. I'm not saying that doesn't mean we don't keep going. I'm saying maybe that means we change our attitudes a little bit and we realize that they're human beings too. Just the same way we'd like them to recognize in us. And if they don't, they don't. Doesn't mean I'm going to give up the cause. All right. Well, I think that's enough lecturing for one day. I apologize. Yes, I know Betamax and VHS was two different things. Friggin'. Leave it to Dave. Leave it to David there to ignore the fact that it was an analogy, an allegory, and Betamax was the superior format, and which of course it was. But who gives a fuck? At any rate, to be fair, liberals piss off liberals. Yeah, no, that's a fair observation. Yeah. Oh, this is a good one. This is a really good one. Yes. Boys always kissed. Boys always kissed. If you didn't realize that, you've got probably bigger problems. Boys always kissed. All right. Well, I think that's about it for tonight. That's been the Week in News. I'm going to hit the Discord. I'll be there probably in, let's see, about 5 minutes. And I'm also going to, let me just check on one thing here and make sure that we are good. Yeah, we're good. So thank you all for joining us. And like I said, I'll be in the Discord. If you haven't joined the Discord, go on in and join and hang out with us. We talk about this and all sorts of other stuff. So it's not just politics. It's we have a good time on there. Also, please, if you've gotten to this far, hopefully you like the show, you like what we talk about, like and subscribe. If you do that each and every time, and you know the people who've been watching us for since day one, since the first episode, well over a year ago, still do it each and every time, and there's a reason. It helps us in the algorithm. It helps the show out. There are a lot of ways to support the show, but that's just one of the easiest, fastest, and you know if you just do that, that's a huge help as well. At any rate, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Night all.